The OECD Public Integrity Indicators establish a new benchmark for government resilience to corruption risks and provide guidance on how to strengthen public integrity. Based on primary data sources and validated by governments, the OECD Public Integrity Indicators will help bolster global efforts against corruption. The objective, evidence-based and actionable data on the platform helps decision-makers understand the strengths and weaknesses of national integrity systems, better allocate resources, and target specific challenges. The indicators represent a dashboard instead of a ranking, rely on primary data rather than expert assessments and reports, and focus on actionable criteria and weights. Over time, the indicators will offer detailed insights on a wide range of issues, grouped into 6 areas. The first set, on the quality of anti-corruption and integrity strategic framework, is available now, with 5 more to follow in 2022. Accountability of public policymaking, strength of external oversight and control, effectiveness of internal control and risk management, fairness, timeliness and openness of enforcement mechanisms, and meritocracy of the public sector. Delve into the data. Download the source files and charts, which can enrich research papers and briefings to inspire better policies. Be part of the data-driven renewal of public integrity. Visit the Public Integrity Indicators portal at oecd-public-integrity-indicators.org.
Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to the International Anti-Corruption Day at the OECD. My name is Elsa Piliszewski. I'm the Director for Public Governance, and I'm delighted to moderate this session and guide you through today's event. Without any further ado, I would like to invite OECD Deputy Secretary General Jeffrey Schlagenhoff to set the scene for us. Jeff, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Elsa. Dear Minister, delegates, ladies and gentlemen. Today, on the occasion of International Anti-Corruption Day, we at the OECD are proud to launch 2 important projects that will shape anti-corruption and integrity policies for OECD members and beyond. First, the OECD Public Integrity Indicators portal, and second, the 2021 recommendation for further combating bribery of foreign public officials in international business transactions. With the OECD Public Integrity Indicators portal, we are launching the OECD's first ever standard indicators on public integrity and anti-corruption developed for and with governments. They represent a new generation of indicators which provide evidence-based, objective data to support concrete action against corruption and allow countries to compare performance and identify best practices. Agreeing on what constitutes valid and reliable indicators on public integrity is in itself a major achievement and is generating interest far beyond the OECD. However, the indicators will only become alive when we see the data. Today, we are also launching the first set of indicators on the quality of public integrity and anti-corruption strategies, which will be followed by 5 more sets of indicators over the course of the next 18 months. Today does not mark the end, but the beginning of what we like to call the year of integrity data. Already, the first data set provides us with a number of valuable insights. First, governments are not yet setting high-level strategic objectives to curb the most serious forms of corruption, namely undue influence, political, and grand corruption. Second, there is a need for better, more inclusive consultation in crafting strategies to strengthen citizens' trust. And third, implementation of strategies to curb corruption is weak. Many countries have implemented less than 50%, less than half, of planned activities, and more than half do not track implementation rates. This needs to improve. The indicators portal will be complemented by insights we are gaining from the introduction of anti-corruption as a standard component in OECD economic surveys, further illustrating the holistic approach the OECD is taking to identify and address corruption risk. These efforts, of course, also include our efforts to support implementation and enforcement of the OECD Anti-Bribery Convention. The convention was adopted in 1997 to combat the bribery of foreign public officials in international business transactions. Today, we strengthen the convention in our commitment to fighting bribery with the launch of the 2021 recommendation for further combating bribery of foreign public officials in international business transactions. The recommendation, last updated in 2009, is the result of a 3-year review process, including the private sector and civil society. It reflects recommendations made by the Working Group on Bribery in its country evaluations on the implementation of the OECD anti-bribery instruments and addresses recent anti-corruption challenges, good practices, and cross-cutting issues such as international cooperation, detection of foreign bribery, and the use of non-trial resolutions. The recommendation also highlights linkages between gender and corruption, the role of innovative technologies in anti-bribery efforts, as well as the need to fight corruption during crisis periods. It also incorporates additional topics that have emerged or significantly evolved since 2009, including addressing the demand side of foreign bribery, the protection of reporting persons or whistleblower protection, incentives for compliance, and data protection. Going forward, the Working Group on Bribery will continue carrying out its rigorous and systematic monitoring of member countries' implementation of the convention and this recommendation. This will ensure that our collective efforts achieve maximum impact. Ladies and gentlemen, corruption is one of the most corrosive issues of our time. It erodes public trust, undermines government legitimacy, and damages economic growth. If we are to build an inclusive and just recovery and restore citizens' trust in our institutions, this is a challenge we must face head-on with both courage and resolve. To do so, we require objective data and measurement to create more inclusive, more outcome-oriented integrity and anti-corruption strategies. Ensuring that standards remain up to date with latest trends, challenges, and realities is equally critical to support a coordinated and efficient international fight against foreign bribery. With your help, we are confident that the OECD Public Integrity Indicators and the 2021 Anti-Bribery Recommendation will contribute to shaping a world that is safer, fairer, and free for corruption. Thanks very much for the opportunity to join you this morning, and I turn the floor back to you, Elsa.
Thank you very much, Jeff, for this introduction and for setting the scene. We're indeed, of course, very delighted to be marking 2 major milestones in our work on anti-corruption and integrity today. Before we go into the panel to discuss what gets measured gets managed, we'll present another very short video to explain what the OECD Public Integrity Indicators portal is really about and how it functions. Thank you.
This is the main page of the OECD Public Integrity Indicators portal. To navigate, simply scroll down and you can see the first set of data published for quality of strategic framework. The radar automatically shows the value of the country of your location, as well as the OECD average. You can change the selection of country by clicking in the middle of the circle, as well as the comparator. For example, you might want to choose the OECD Best Performer, or choose to compare against a different country. For each of the 8 indicators, you can dive down into the sub-indicators by clicking on the line in the radar. Scroll down and see how many of the sub-indicators were fulfilled. Go back on the main page, where you can scroll further down and see an overview of all 8 indicators in terms of the best performers. Click on either of the indicators to sort the table, or click on a country to see on which of the 8 indicators they perform best. Below, you can see the countries covered. If you click on a country, it takes you to the country page. At the end of the page, you can see the 6 sets of indicators agreed by OECD countries. Data is available for quality of strategic framework. Data collection is ongoing for accountability of public policy making. And data collection is scheduled for the remaining 4 sets of indicators. For a quick overview of this new set of indicators, click on the About page. The OECD would encourage you to share this new set of primary data. You can do so by clicking on the Download or Share icons next to the charts. To stay informed about developments on the site, sign up to the OECD Anti-Corruption and Integrity newsletter.
Thank you very much. Now we get into the panel, what gets measured gets managed. So we're extremely lucky to have such esteemed speakers today with us to discuss how to take action driven by evidence and indicators. And I would like to introduce, of course, first the Minister of Transparency, Supervision and Control in Brazil, Wagner Rosario. Charles Duchesne, Director of the Agence Française Anticorruption, Delia Ferrero-Rubio, Chair of Transparency International, and Alvaro Pereira, Director of the Country Studies Branch in the OECD's Economic Department, a colleague whom I thank dearly and who has always had anti-corruption as one of his priorities. So welcome and thank you all for being with us today. A warm welcome also to our audience from all over the world. And it is really my pleasure to moderate this discussion, which will provide us with an opportunity to delve into the OECD Public Integrity Indicators, which really represent for us a new generation of indicators. And I think the anti-corruption community around the world will appreciate the effort which many people have been waiting for a long time. So it is really the first time an international organization develops standard indicators to monitor an international legal instrument on anti-corruption and integrity, namely, of course, the OECD Recommendation on Public Integrity. The indicators offer an alternative to other existing instruments, such as the Corruption Perception Index and worldwide governance indicators. Our indicators respond to a need expressed by many governments to measure how they are addressing corruption risks in a very reliable manner. As mentioned by our Deputy Secretary General, the indicators establish an OECD benchmark, not a ranking, and also putting credible evidence and real-time progress at the forefront of government action. The OECD, of course, is in a unique position to work closely with governments and government data. There's also a tradition for indicators to track and support implementation of the OECD's legal instruments, in this case, of course, the OECD Recommendation on Public Integrity, as I mentioned before. However, we've also included standards from the Council of Europe, the United Nations, and other bodies to make these indicators really almost a universal framework, I want to say. Let me now turn to our panelists here to get their views on this achievement for the OECD and the wider international community. And Minister, turning to you first, how can the indicators help central governments in improving and in informing their approach to public integrity? And can you provide us with an example from Brazil already? Minister Wagner, the floor is yours.
Obrigado, Elza, pela pergunta. Cumprimento aqui todos os colegas, Dr. Jeffrey, Dr. Álvaro Pereira, doutora Adélia Ferreira Rubio. É um prazer estar aqui hoje e falando um pouco sobre as nossas atividades e principalmente o desenvolvimento da integridade no âmbito do nosso país, aqui do Brasil. Bem, nós iniciamos um trabalho de implementação de integridade dentro do governo federal em 2017. Foi o momento em que nós tornamos obrigatória a implementação de unidades de gestão de integridade baseados em com determinadas características específicas e e no início tivemos uma certa dificuldade, e nesse caso criamos indicadores e também o mínimo de características que eram necessárias para a implementação do programa e colocamos isso em transparência total na internet para que a sociedade soubesse quais unidades do governo estavam implementando a integridade. Conseguimos finalizar, iniciamos em 2017, conseguimos finalizar isso em 2020. Então, em 2020 foi quando conseguimos entregar 100% dos órgãos do governo federal com unidade de gestão de integridade, com plano de integridade. Porém, esses planos, com certeza, possuem deficiências, porque ainda são relativamente novos. E quando temos essa possibilidade de ver a OCDE lançar os indicadores, a CGU, que é um órgão do governo federal, ela é responsável pela coordenação de toda a implementação desse programa de integridade, e nós estamos justamente evoluindo para avaliar e poder redirecionar esses planos e ter esses indicadores em nossas mãos para que a gente possa tomar decisões e dar o encaminhamento necessário, ele é essencial. Além dessa utilização no âmbito interno, porque nos dará um guia para que nós possamos cobrar cada órgão e implementar os programas de integridade da melhor maneira possível, nós teremos indicadores com outros países, justamente para que a gente possa trocar experiências, observar boas práticas ao redor do mundo, em locais ou em áreas onde nós somos mais deficientes. Então, acho que já tentamos aqui, temos experiências no Brasil, mas tenho certeza que os indicadores da OCDE serão um guia importante, tanto na avaliação das políticas que estão em implementação no Brasil, né, como também num referencial para que a gente possa crescer e estar alinhado aí com as melhores práticas mundiais.
Thank you, Minister. And we certainly hope that our indicators will be as useful as you're saying, and hope that they can serve many countries around the world. Turning now to Monsieur Charles Duchesne, l'agence française anticorruption, Monsieur Duchesne, a été très impliqué dans le développement de l'OCDE. Pardon, ma faute. Pourquoi ces indicateurs sont-ils importants? Est-ce qu'ils changent quelque chose au fonctionnement de l'agence?
Merci Madame, bonjour à tous. Merci de m'avoir invité à cette rencontre. En effet, l'agence française anticorruption a été très impliquée dans l'élaboration de ces indicateurs, puisque dès 2019, l'OCDE a invité notre agence à rejoindre une task force composée de 9 pays membres du groupe de travail, des hauts responsables de l'intégrité publique, en vue de la création d'indicateurs permettant d'évaluer la mise en œuvre effective de la recommandation de l'OCDE sur l'intégrité publique. Adoptée en 2017, cette recommandation n'a pas de portée juridique obligatoire, mais sa force morale est reconnue dans la mesure où elle correspond à la volonté politique des adhérents. Alors, dans le cadre des missions de l'AFA, l'AFA est responsable de la préparation du plan pluriannuel de lutte contre la corruption. Le premier plan lancé l'a été en 2020 et les indicateurs ont attiré notre attention sur certains aspects de notre stratégie anticorruption, à la fois sur les aspects positifs que nous pouvions valoriser davantage à travers la mise en œuvre de ces indicateurs, mais aussi sur les points moins positifs qui étaient susceptibles de connaître une amélioration dans le cadre du prochain plan. Alors, pour ce qui concerne les aspects positifs, en France, toutes les stratégies reposent sur une évaluation des risques en matière d'intégrité. Les acteurs non étatiques sont associés au groupe de travail chargé d'élaborer ou de modifier les stratégies. Pour ce qui concerne les axes d'amélioration, nous avons vu la possibilité d'organiser une grande consultation publique sur la stratégie de préparer un rapport d'analyse sur les risques qui couvrent l'ensemble du système d'intégrité publique. Voilà quels sont les éléments que je peux vous donner.
Merci beaucoup pour ces éléments. Je pense qu'ils vont servir aussi aux autres pays et sur comment avancer avec ces indicateurs. Now turning to Delia. Transparency International is really the parent organization behind the Corruption Perception Index, of course, the most famous and widely used indicator on corruption. I myself started my own career on that many years ago. How do you see the OECD Public Integrity Indicators complement, of course, the existing indices produced by civil society organizations?
Thank you very much, Elsa, and congratulations to the OECD team that has developed this interactive platform and portal. I am anxious to go there, navigate, and surf the data. As you say, the CPI is almost more than 20 years old now, a trusted instrument. It is a different instrument. And the important thing here is that we are not trying to compete, but we are working together in a collective action effort to bring different perspectives from different point of view, different validation system, different methodologies. So when we started with the CPI, as you mentioned, there was nothing in terms of measuring corruption or having a picture of what corruption appears in the countries in the world. Now, after 20 years, we have plenty of tools, trackers, we have almost everything, lots of niche instruments to address one issue in particular: political finance, lobbying, integrity in business sector, compliance, ESGs, and a caterva of measurement tools and indicators. So I think this is a new complementary effort that I will use for sure as all our chapters and all experts working on corruption, because we are all waiting the time to transform these commitments, the anti-corruption commitments, and we are celebrating today the International Day. It should be the day to go from the commitments, which are enough, to implementation and enforcement. And sometimes there is needed to have the documents, the primary documents, in order to see what countries are doing or not doing, what strategy they have. And I would say that the most important thing is to check whether they are fulfilling the commitments in the strategy. The first indicators we are going to see after this launch is the framework of the strategies that countries has prepared. That's wonderful. That's great. I hope every country has a good and solid and robust strategy against corruption. But that's not enough. We have to track whether that is translated into the reality in order to stop corruption to be at the heart of all our crises as society. If you go from the Beirut blast to Afghanistan, or to the Amazon deforestation, at the heart of the problem, you have two things: corruption and human beings as the victims. We have to have that in mind. Corruption is a human rights issue. And this kind of frameworks, indicators, standards help to see the picture, to track the development and the different maturity of the systems in different countries. I think that the most interesting use of this new portal is to facilitate access to information. In many countries, probably it is easy for OECD to access the documents, not for citizens, not for investigative journalists, not for civil society organizations in a scenario where civic space is really very worryingly reduced in an overall trend. We have seen yesterday the civic information in 89% of the countries, the civic space is under threat. So having the document through the OECD is a very, very good and positive thing. Second, it will be useful for advocacy, for awareness raising, and also for policy design. And I hope that this will work because of the OECD supporting and backing this as an incentive for countries to do better and to compare their systems towards the best performer or the other countries in the world. So I think this is very, very useful. I am anxious to go there to the portal and to keep on working together, as Jeffrey says, to rebuild trust, because that is particularly after COVID and in the post-pandemic, and I hope it was a post-pandemic, but in this moment, we have to rebuild trust. And to rebuild trust, we need truth. We need to go back to values and to go back to really an access to information, access to what is going on behalf of citizens, because we have to remind that public officials are public servants, and that's not remembered in some countries.
Thank you very much, Delia. Let me reemphasize how much we value the partnership with Transparency International for such a long time. It's great, and you're absolutely right in the sense that our indices complement each other along with others. And also this new portal for us is a way also to portray what can governments do in this field, and also, as usual for the OECD, which is really in our DNA, help increase peer pressure, as you said it with other words, but peer pressure across countries on what can governments do. Now turning to the director of the OECD's Economics Department, Alvaro, how do integrity and anti-corruption matter for economic growth? Can the public integrity indicators help provide better evidence or policy levers to promote growth?
Thank you very much, Elsa. Let me just first of all congratulate you and your team and the governance director for a really important, and not only portal, but set of indicators that I think will be very important going forward. But also would like to say this is the sort of work that makes me very proud to work for the OECD. So congratulations. I would also like to, since Delia is in the panel, like to congratulate the Transparency International for their public service over the past few decades. I have no doubt that your institution has been one of the most important, instrumental really, in the fight against corruption all around the world. And just to give an idea, I'll talk about it a bit later, but your indicators are used in every single survey we do for countries, and they're essential for us to understand and to put, as Elsa was saying, to put pressure on countries to do something and to act. So I think that's quite important. Going back to your question, well, there's overwhelming evidence on the negative impact of corruption on growth. It's just overwhelming. There's plenty of empirical studies that show this, and clearly, corruption not only weakens the social fabric of a democratic society, but also erodes public trust and damages government legitimacy. And so fighting corruption really and promoting an agenda of integrity is fighting for democracy and fighting for a better future for all of us. So, I think this should be front and center. For me, should be priority number one of every single country, to make sure that integrity in fighting corruption is the top of priority, because basically if that doesn't happen in any country, then obviously, again, as you said, that there's a question of trust with the governments, but also trust in terms of policy making. And so it's very difficult to get credibility on the other areas. And you asked me also, can the public integrity indicators help us provide better evidence? I have also no doubt about it. So in our OECD economic surveys, which is a regular peer review of all member countries, but not only, but quite a few other non-members. And we look systematically in every single one of them exactly what countries are doing regarding corruption, what they need to do also regarding the fighting corruption and promoting integrity. So what it really matters and why it's so important, this set of indicators, is exactly to help us identify the problems, but also to help us think about an institutional framework to fight corruption and promote a culture of integrity. And so I think there's great potential of the public integrity indicators to help us guide and help us also design better and more efficient anti-corruption policies, at the same time that we share experience with the different countries, what worked and didn't work in the fight against corruption, so that we are able to help every country implement, not only, as Delia was saying, not only identify, have a nice strategy, but more importantly, the next step, implementing the legal framework to be able to fight corruption and promote integrity.
Thank you very much, Alvaro. And indeed, I mean, this nexus, I would say, between corruption, low trust, and low growth is something that is crucial to think about. And as we're entering a period where governments will have a crucial role in transforming the economy for the green transition, they need high trust and cannot afford corruption, not at all. So, Minister, turning back to you, how do we advance from here? Now we have these indicators. We used to have, all the TI indicators, many other indicators as well. Now we have these institutional indicators. So how do we promote real change in policy and practice?
Elza, agora, tendo os indicadores à mão, nós passamos a ter agora um direcionamento claro de como seguir. Desde que a OCDE lançou sua recomendação sobre integridade pública, do Conselho da OCDE, nós tínhamos um direcionamento e 13 princípios baseados em 3 grandes eixos, um eixo voltado à cultura, um de estratégia e outro de prestação de contas, de accountability. E nós tínhamos mais ou menos, dentro desses os 13 princípios, mas eles não estavam desdobrados em indicadores, em metas que deveriam ser atingidas durante o trabalho. Eu acho que os indicadores eles trazem principalmente um ponto importante, que é um ponto de você ter indicadores que não são muito baseados numa percepção das pessoas, eles são mais objetivos, e com isso a gente consegue dar um direcionamento mais seguro para o trabalho. E a gente sabe que às vezes elas são mais fáceis, mas para você realmente fazer a mudança, mudar a cultura do seu país, implementar um programa desse com efetividade, é extremamente necessário que a gente coloque a mão na massa, que a gente comece a trabalhar efetivamente, porque entre as ideias e a ação existe um espaço enorme. Eu acho que nós já estamos trabalhando e acho que evoluímos muito. Nós temos hoje um plano anticorrupção publicado no Brasil. Entregaremos hoje, daqui a pouco, 60 ações que foram criadas nesse ano. Nós temos 153 ações para entregar até 2025. Entregaremos 60 hoje. Várias já foram entregues durante o ano, mas somamos nesse um ano de plano 60 ações. Hoje o governo brasileiro entrega ao Congresso Nacional um projeto de lei de lobby. A OCDE acabou de fazer um levantamento da situação na América Latina e Caribe de ações de combate à corrupção e o combate e ações específicas para a regulamentação de lobby. Eu acho que é a maior deficiência da região hoje. Então, nós entregamos hoje uma norma alinhada com todos os princípios previstos dentro da OCDE para uma norma de lobby, da última geração das leis de lobby. Entregamos também um novo decreto que protege os denunciantes dentro do sistema que o Poder Executivo Federal tem. E nós recebemos aí mais de 100 mil manifestações de de pessoas de ouvidoria, entre elas denúncias todos os anos, né? Estamos hoje também implementando um sistema único de agendas públicas dentro do governo federal, onde todas as informações de quem se reuniu com quem, inclusive lobistas, estarão disponíveis na internet, num único sítio para todos os cidadãos. Então, eu acho que, tanto na área de conflito de interesse, de lobby, de todo nós estamos evoluindo, e eu tenho certeza que esses indicadores vão nos ajudar ainda mais a transformar o nosso país e, com certeza, melhorar toda a nossa região. Então, eu acho que, respondendo objetivamente a pergunta, o que nós temos que fazer agora é colocar a mão na massa, ir ao trabalho e conseguirmos aí realmente implementar. Tenho certeza que os indicadores serão muito importantes para que a gente possa atingir o nosso objetivo.
Thank you very much, Minister, and very impressive number of measures indeed taken in Brazil. And you're also providing me with the opportunity to say that we are currently we will be revising our recommendation on lobbying to modernize it and include the new, I would say, lobbying landscape that includes, of course, transnational lobbying, but also issues related to social media and the new information system in general to make it more comprehensive. Now turning to Monsieur Duchesne. Monsieur Duchesne, comment les indicateurs peuvent aider les gouvernements? Pardon. Comment les indicateurs peuvent aider les gouvernements à mieux coopérer et à coordonner leurs efforts en matière d'intégrité publique au niveau international, selon vous?
Bien, écoutez, d'abord, je voudrais dire que les indicateurs sont très importants parce qu'il y a de la part des États parfois un manque de volonté, mais il y a aussi, surtout, parfois, une ignorance de la façon dont il faut s'y prendre pour arriver au résultat qu'on attend d'eux. En un mot, ils ont du mal à passer de la théorie à la pratique et les indicateurs permettent d'avoir une vision beaucoup plus concrète, beaucoup plus pratique et donc d'accéder beaucoup plus vite au résultat commun qui est attendu de tous. Alors, comment ces indicateurs peuvent-ils aider les gouvernements à coopérer, à coordonner leurs efforts? Bien, au plan national, les indicateurs permettent de mobiliser et de sensibiliser un nombre important d'acteurs autour des enjeux de l'intégrité publique. D'ailleurs, pour renseigner les questionnaires, eh bien, une coordination administrative renforcée est absolument indispensable, absolument nécessaire. Et cet exercice a permis de mener de façon, je dis ça parce que nous avons été un peu, comment dire, nous avons participé au test de certains indicateurs et donc pour renseigner ces questionnaires, nous avons dû nous livrer de façon collective à une réflexion approfondie sur notre système d'intégrité publique et sur l'articulation entre les différentes parties prenantes et sur nos choix institutionnels. Au plan international, les indicateurs peuvent nous aider également à engager une coopération technique de qualité avec nos homologues étrangers. Et j'en profite pour saluer le ministre Rosario Wagner, avec lequel nous avons d'ailleurs signé une convention, un protocole d'accord. Et ces relations, cette coopération avec nos homologues étrangers est basée sur des besoins bien identifiés et sur les meilleures pratiques reconnues, en évitant évidemment de classer les États, c'est pas ça l'objectif, mais tout en démontrant qu'aucun dispositif n'est parfait sur tous les points, mais les indicateurs favorisent l'apprentissage mutuel et permettent j'allais dire, d'avoir des dispositifs qui, à défaut d'être totalement conformes, sont équivalents et permettent de conduire au même résultat et permettent surtout de se comprendre, parce que c'est important que ce soit au niveau de la prévention qui nous concerne nous, mais également au niveau de la répression, si on ne demande pas aux États d'avoir les mêmes règles, mais afin d'avoir des règles qui sont compatibles, de pouvoir faire en quelque sorte de la concordance qui permet de faire aboutir les actions. Et puis enfin, les indicateurs peuvent offrir une feuille de route utile pour les réseaux de coopération internationale, comme le réseau NCPA à la création duquel nous avons contribué, car ils mettent en lumière les défis communs à plusieurs États et qui peuvent donc faire l'objet d'un dialogue multilatéral plus étroit.
Merci beaucoup et vous avez tout à fait, vous avez mis le doigt sur quelque chose de très juste qui est en fait la création d'un langage commun. Je parle d'un langage, non pas forcément des mots, mais aussi d'un langage sur comment on mesure et une capacité à se retrouver entre les différents acteurs internationaux sur des mesures sur lesquelles on est tous à peu près d'accord sur ce qu'on mesure, quelles sont les définitions et on va à partir de là. Merci beaucoup. Turning to Delia now. Delia, of course, TI is the central civil society organization on anti-corruption, and Alvaro has reminded us of that very rightly. And we were thinking, how can better quantity and quality of government data on anti-corruption and public integrity help civil society organizations in the fight against corruption? And what could the OECD do? What more could we do to support civil society organizations in their efforts in this specific field of anti-corruption?
As I said, Elsa, in my previous intervention, of course, this will be very valuable for civil society organizations and for citizens. It is an attractive portal, as we have seen, so it is easy to navigate. I will go there and find, for instance, whether we have the PDF documents supporting what governments are saying and OECD is validating. That would be a great contribution. During COVID pandemic, for instance, it has been very difficult to access information and documentation, for instance, on COVID vaccines contracts. And as you know, public procurement has been one of the risky areas, and the scandals on COVID-related corruption has been focused there. So if we have access to the documents, that will be great. Another thing that I think, I don't know whether you have already view of that, is the possibility to have a channel, to open a channel, because we are talking about open data here and collaboration, open a channel for citizens or civil society organizations to say something about what is happening with these standards and indicators. Not in order to start a fight, but in order to complete the picture, because integrity is a key priority, not only in public sector, also in private sector and in our common ordinary life. But it is not the only piece in the puzzle of corruption around the world. So when we are presenting our CPI, for instance, we are referring to public sector perception on integrity. We are not talking about money laundering. We have other tools for that. I'm talking about Transparency International and our chapters. We are not talking about commitments for mutual legal assistance. We have another track for that. We are not talking about what citizens' experience with corruption is. And for that, we have the barometer of corruption, global barometer, more than 100 countries analyzed. So we have to put together all these pieces in order to have the picture of corruption nowadays. And we have to have in mind and not to forget that integrity goes beyond the Excel file. It goes beyond the books in the shelves. It goes beyond the laws approved. At the end, there is a person ready to say no to corruption. And for that, we have to work in education, in capacity building, not waiting for a person to be appointed minister or be elected president to show them, Mr. President or Mrs. President, here there is the law of information, access to information. Here we have a code of conduct or an ethic law which states in Article 2, invariably, the duties of public official is to be honest. Okay, if we have to have that set and established in a law, we have a social problem. We have to rebuild the consensus on what is right and what is wrong, and it is an imperative of the time. If we don't go that way, we will have the most beautiful standards, principles, even rules and laws, and we will still have Pandora Papers, Panama Papers, leaks, etc., and lots of scandals. So we have to work in many, many aspects, and this is one which is a priority for all of us.
Thank you very much, Delia. I very much like your characterization of the puzzle. And I think we're looking at, one piece after another one. And the culture of integrity that you're talking about to support anti-corruption is extremely important, and it's a wide array of initiatives that have to be taken, and that's a very, very important point. Turning back to Alvaro, if we look forward 5 to 10 years, what kind of evidence would you like the OECD to have to support governments in curbing corruption and strengthening inclusive growth?
Well, at the OECD, as you know, we work very often when we give policy advice. We work first, we look at indicators, benchmarking countries, see what is working for countries, what is not working. So certainly continue to strengthen these indicators, I think, is key. And I think this is the first step that you are launching here is going to be quite important. I think one area that I'm going to be particularly interested when this happens later this year or next year, the issues on accountability of public sector, meritocracy indicators, I think will be quite interesting. Also quite interesting would be to continue to strengthen the efficiency of justice system indicators. I think this is something that is key. If we cannot fight corruption without an effective justice system. So, working more on justice, I think that's key. And I think for the OECD, our motto is always better policy for better lives. Basically, what we care about is what I was alluding to earlier, which is what are the best practices? How can we learn from the best examples that countries have very strong institutional framework to fight corruption? And if I'm a policymaker that is interested to fight corruption, which reform shall I promote to fight corruption and promote integrity? So I think this is quite important. And going back to what we were discussing in the panel, it's key to go from, okay, you design a nice strategy, and then you go to the, how can we implement the strategy and to have a strong institutional framework to fight corruption. So all these issues regarding lobbying, whistleblower protection, procurement, these are issues that are important to reflect also in our policy designs. And so I have no doubt these will be key. What I can guarantee you is that in our surveys that we look at economic performance and reforms for the future, I have no doubt that we'll be the first ones to use this data like we do already for the previous indicators that you have, but also what Delia's team has been doing over the years. But we'll be with the first users in our surveys because we need to help countries design exactly these better and stronger institutional frameworks to fight corruption and public integrity, so that we are able to promote more jobs, more growth, and especially more prosperity and a better future for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much for everyone. Our Deputy Secretary General has been very inspired by this discussion and would like to say a few comments additional.
Yeah, I'll be very brief. I'm borrowing on Delia's comments that one of the things that's key here is I was listening to the conversation, I was remembered of an old expression that comes from US politics on this issue. transparency is really important. And there's an old saying that says, sunlight is our best disinfectant. And I think sunlight, so there's transparency and people can see where things are happening, is really, really important in combating this. So I'd like to just give a shout out for the work that Transparency International and others have done in this area over the years to give access to people of what's going on. Thank you. You're muted, Elsa.
Sorry, yes. Thank you very much, Jeff. And now we're coming to the closing of this discussion. But maybe since we have a few minutes additional, I will ask each speaker in very short 30 seconds to 1 minute to give us your thoughts about the key takeaways from these efforts on indicators, and also your view on how you're going to use them very briefly. Start with Delia, for example.
Excellent. Of course, we will use it, but in order to progress in the fight against corruption, we have to take into account that these are just tools. We have to transform commitments into reality. That's the call of the hour. And when we fight against corruption, we are fighting for democracy, for human rights, and for the well-being of people. That's the objective. That's the objective. And this will be a very useful tool in that way forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And I see also a very interesting comment in the chat function about the biggest problem is the system. So if the other speakers want to comment in the final comments on how indices can help fight the system of corruption, I think that would be welcome. Minister, maybe you have a view on this issue?
Obrigado, Elsa. A gente tem certeza que os indicadores vão ser bastante importantes para o nosso país, e não só para o nosso país, como o mundo como um todo. Como eu disse nas minhas palavras anteriores, nós estamos prontos para realmente, como disse a doutora, agora transformar, né, todas essas intenções, todos esses compromissos em realidade. Eu acho que os indicadores vão contribuir muito para o fortalecimento do nosso sistema. Eu acho que é isso. Agora, eu falo que a gente chega uma hora que a gente tem que falar menos e trabalhar mais. Acho que temos muito a entregar, muito a fazer ainda. O Brasil é um país que ele é enorme, tem dificuldades, é um país continental. Quando falamos em implementação de integridade, temos um trabalho no órgão central, mas temos 26 estados e um Distrito Federal, mais 5.570 municípios, cada um com uma característica. Você vai ao norte do país, é uma característica, ao sul é outro. Então, unir isso tudo, ter uma estratégia ampla que abarque todo o país não é fácil. Então, nós temos que trabalhar muito, e eu tenho certeza que esse trabalho, seguindo esses indicadores da OCDE, eles vão trazer resultados, e esses resultados vão ser apresentados em breve para todo mundo. Muito obrigado pela oportunidade.
Thanks very much to you, Minister, and indeed going in the direction of what Delia said, roll up our sleeves and go into very quick actions. Thank you very much. Peut-être, now, Monsieur Duchesne, peut-être, à votre tour, peut-être de conclure sur comment ces indicateurs peuvent aider à lutter contre le système que représente la corruption.
Pardonnez-moi, à qui avez-vous posé la question? À moi?
Oui.
Excusez-moi, mais le son a été coupé. Je n'avais pas entendu que vous vous adressiez à moi. Alors, si vous voulez, ces indicateurs viennent combler une lacune en offrant un nouvel outil pour mesurer l'adéquation des dispositifs nationaux et l'efficacité des politiques publiques en matière de lutte contre la corruption. Ça c'est une première chose. Mais moi, ce que je crois surtout, c'est que vous parliez de système. On ne change pas les systèmes de l'extérieur. Il faut être dans le système pour le faire changer. Mais il est très difficile de faire changer un système quand on est à l'intérieur si on n'a pas l'appui, le soutien, le regard extérieur de ceux qui peuvent avoir une position critique, positive d'ailleurs ou négative sur ce qu'on fait. Et je pense que la lutte contre la corruption ne peut pas avancer à l'intérieur d'un système si elle ne bénéficie pas de l'appui d'une forme de communauté, en l'occurrence de communauté internationale. Donc, comme je le disais tout à l'heure, ces indicateurs, c'est déjà des questions très concrètes qui vont permettre de voir si, pour parler simplement, on est aux normes, si on est aux standards internationaux ou si on n'y est pas. Ça va permettre très concrètement de définir ce qu'il faut faire ou pas pour améliorer nos dispositifs internes. Et puis surtout, ça sera une occasion de plus de se soumettre au regard des autres, au regard parfois critique, parfois assez dur, mais dont certains ont besoin pour avancer. Donc je pense que c'est quelque chose qui est absolument indispensable et c'est quelque chose qui en même temps donne une forme de liberté aux autorités nationales parce qu'elles sont moins isolées, moins seules pour faire avancer les choses puisqu'elles ont le soutien de toute une communauté derrière elles avec des instruments de mesure qui sont les mêmes. Donc ça me paraît nécessaire.
Merci beaucoup pour cette réflexion très juste, plus générale aussi sur le multilatéralisme et ce qu'on espère, le rôle qu'on espère jouer aussi à l'OCDE dans un nombre de domaines. Mais ce regard extérieur porté soit par la société civile comme TI, soit par vos pairs, c'est-à-dire les autres gouvernements. Alvaro, if we want to move to you, you will have the final words and you can conclude on how the indicators can help fight the system.
Well, I think that these indicators and others, governments sometimes think that the indicators have to name and shame them, but really, I don't see the indicators like this. The indicators are not good for naming and shaming, but they are areas, or they help us identify areas that for improvement, and that's how I see it. I think these indicators are important, exactly to try to see which areas can we reinforce to fight against corruption, which areas do we need to improve, and which legislations we need to change in order to make sure that what happened in your country regarding corruption or lack of integrity can be changed. And so I think that's the most important thing. On our side, certainly, I have no doubt that these type of indicators and the continuing work done by several institutions will allow us not only to have our recommendations, to have high-level objectives, that are beautiful in words but no action, and would allow us to go deeper into the analysis, try to identify the problems and say, okay, this is what you need to do in order to improve the fight against corruption and promote integrity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alvaro. And just, I'm looking at the chat function one more second with Delia giving us her formula against corruption, 2 pluses for information and integrity and 2 minuses for impunity and indifference. And I think we can conclude on that. And just a word of conclusion, as mentioned by the Deputy Secretary General, I mean, the OECD is really well placed to provide the evidence we currently need to help fight corruption more effectively. It's a long journey, we've all said that, but we're proud that OECD member countries are taking really the first steps and providing really access to their data on these with these important indicators. They feel a vacuum and respond to a direct request also from countries to provide really an alternative and even a new generation of indicators. Minister Rosario and Director Duchesne provided really excellent examples of how they already use the data to improve their practices, and of course how the international collaboration facilitated by the OECD really helps in this regard. As mentioned by Delia, we count on citizens and on civil society members to make the best use of this new data, considering that it's a great source of primary data validated by countries. We trust the public will be able to analyze and also use the public integrity indicators to to really inform and enhance their work. The indicators do not only provide an objective tool for measuring public integrity, but also ensure the legitimacy of the data. Data collected with governments, validated by governments to help governments inform that public policies for better lives, and of course, in complement with other indicators from civil society. With that, I thank the panelists very much for their intervention and their great insights. Now we're going to the second part of the Anti-Corruption Day at the OECD. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Now I would like to pass on to Mr. Drago Kos, Chair of the OECD Working Group on Bribery, for the second segment on the 2021 recommendation for further combating bribery of foreign public officials in international business transactions. Thank you very much. Drago, you have the floor.
Thank you, Elsa. So today we are concluding 5 years of really hard work on the New York, or better say on the revised recommendation from 2009. We engaged many stakeholders, but I will talk about that later. And now I have the pleasure and honor to introduce to you it's the new Secretary General of the OECD, new for us because we meet him for the first time, Mr. Matthias Cormann. He will say some words as introduction, and then we will pick up from there. We are very happy to have with us Mr. Cormann. We are looking forward to also meet you in person one day, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Chair, dear Chair, Drago Kos, delegates, colleagues. It's my absolute pleasure to be with you today to launch the OECD's 2021 Anti-Bribery Recommendation. And thank you to you, Drago. Thank you to the members of the OECD Working Group on Bribery for your commitment and the energy that you've invested over the past 3 years to complete this milestone project, despite the challenge brought about by the pandemic. Let me in particular congratulate the chair of the working group for your unrelenting determination and leadership in working to secure this outcome. The new anti-bribery recommendation, last updated in 2009, comes at a critical time in our efforts to step up implementation and enforcement of the OECD Anti-Bribery Convention and the collective commitment of our members and partners to combat corruption globally. The recommendation complements and strengthens the OECD Anti-Bribery Convention, which requires all 44 parties to the convention to hold individuals and companies liable for bribery of foreign public officials in international business transactions. With this updated recommendation, the parties to the convention agree to put in place new measures to reinforce their efforts to prevent, to detect, and to investigate foreign bribery. The OECD has been at the forefront in this global fight against corruption. The inception of the OECD Anti-Bribery Convention in 1999 fundamentally changed the global anti-corruption landscape. By the end of 2019, 651 individuals and 230 legal entities had been criminally sanctioned for foreign bribery in countries party to the convention, and 492 investigations for foreign bribery are reportedly ongoing. These cases have resulted in record fines, including the $3 billion US settlement of Goldman Sachs for its role in the 1MDB scandal back in October 2020. But having said all of that, several countries continue to lag behind. This, of course, hinders the push toward a collective and properly coordinated fight against transnational bribery, and it undermines the trust in our institutions and in our economies. COVID crisis has only further underscored the urgency of tackling this challenge and ensuring better, stronger, and more resilient rules and institutions. So this 2021 recommendation updates and expands the toolbox at hand for countries party to the convention to combat cross-border corruption. Let me highlight 3 ways in which this recommendation will help advance our collective fight against foreign bribery. First, the recommendation aims to reinforce the capacity of law enforcement authorities by calling on all adherents to ensure they have the investigative tools, the resources, and the capacity to coordinate internationally. In doing so, the recommendation will help countries work in a more aligned, coordinated, and thus efficient way. Second, the recommendation underlines the importance of supporting and engaging companies that are often on the front line in fighting foreign bribery. The updated recommendation provides guidance to ensure those companies that operate with integrity are better shielded against bribe solicitation. By contributing to holding companies to high ethical standards, the anti-bribery recommendation will help foster a thriving business climate. Third, the recommendation ensures that countries adhering to the Anti-Bribery Convention protect those that have the courage to report corruption. Whistleblowers have an incredibly important role in upholding transparency and accountability, promoting integrity, and detecting misconduct. With the 2021 recommendation, the Working Group on Bribery is advancing further on this by calling on all adherents to introduce comprehensive and effective protections for whistleblowers in the public and private sectors. This will undoubtedly enhance detection of foreign bribery through those that witness it firsthand. Colleagues, friends, Chair, fighting bribery is an uphill battle. In a way, it will always be an uphill battle, which requires persistent focus and effort. In the face of differing national priorities, one thing remains certain, and that is that anti-corruption and integrity policies must meet at the intersection of public, private, and civil institutions. The promise of a more cohesive and fair society will only be delivered if we all step up, are accountable, and take responsibility together. No single entity can confront these challenges alone. The OECD, for our part, remains committed to tackling foreign bribery and corruption by working with all stakeholders, including our partners like Business at OECD and Transparency International, to ensure that our standards remain contemporary and up to speed. Together, we can keep winning what will continue to be a perpetual battle against corruption and build a strong, sustainable, and resilient future. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to talk to you this morning, or this afternoon, I should say.
Thank you very much, Secretary General, Mr. Pullman. Well, it's encouraging to see and to hear, let's say, that we are now together. I will not say start, but continue the global and coordinated fight against the scourge of bribery, foreign, but also at the domestic level, national one. And I can only assure you that the Working Group on Bribery will do everything in its powers to ensure the rigorous enforcement of the revised recommendation, as we did until now with the convention and the 2000 recommendation. And we also hope that if we will have any problems, that you will offer us your assistance on doing so.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. So you heard our Secretary General. We started this exercise back in 2017 when we adopted a decision that we will revise the 2009 recommendation. We first collected the inputs of our member states and some of our external stakeholders on what should be dealt with in the revised recommendation. And in 2019, we had the first round of exchange of views with our external stakeholders. In 2020, we engaged our law enforcement officials who are meeting every 6 months to get their input. And in this year, we ran the second round of consultations with our external stakeholders. and we also consulted let's say, the relevant parts and parties of the OECD. So finally, we got a draft, which was agreeable to all members of the working group on bribery. We submitted it to the OECD Council, and the OECD Council formally adopted the recommendation in the revised recommendation on 26th of November this year. Before going into the substance of it, of course, I will not read it. You can do that by yourselves. It's online since 26th of November. I've just mentioned some most important parts of it. But before going there, I would like to really thank, first of all, let's say, the members of the Secretariat who are really working hard on the text of the recommendation. I'm sure they were also dreaming about it during the nights because we had so many exchanges. Then, of course, all our member states with plenty of interventions which enabled us to increase the quality of the text, which is now we can call it, let's say, at the cutting edge of what can be done in the world against foreign bribery. Of course, there's always room for improvements, but we had to leave something for our, let's say, successors for the future. And last but not least, I would also like to thank our external friends. We had many interventions, either written or oral. If I just mention a few, let's say the International Bar Association, so-called Recommendation 6 group, many non-governmental organizations, Transparency International. I read them all, I will spend all the time which is foreseen for my speech. BIAC. So we really did our best to listen to and to take into consideration, let's say, the input of our friends from the private sector and from our friends from civil society. Of course, at the end of the day, it is still the final text is the end result of negotiations of 44 member states. So maybe some things are not at the level which some of us would like them to have. But speaking on average and in general terms, for sure, the revised text of recommendation is really something we can be all proud of. Not only us in the working group, but also those of you who might think that your recommendations have not been included in the text or your proposals are not included in the text. Without your assistance and help, things might be even weaker. So what's so important in the new recommendation? First of all, we did not only deepen the existing text from 2009, we also entered some new areas. I'll just mention a few of them. For the first time, we addressed the demand side of foreign bribery cases because it was clear for us, based on our research and based on our experience, that you cannot find foreign bribery only on the supply side. Of course, we are limited with the objective fact that the OECD Convention is only incriminating active side of foreign bribery, so we could not go, let's say, into 100% of what we would do otherwise we would do. We extensively discussed sanctions and confiscations. You might think that, let's say, this is something which was there before. It was, but not to such, let's say, we did not go so deep before. Then some part which is brand new, which is the part on something which we call non-trial resolutions, because we are trying to encompass, let's say, different names of different institutes of different countries, NDAs, DPAs, CGIPs in France, and so on. So basically, there are non-trial agreements between the suspects, either legal or natural persons, and prosecution services. We added an extensive part on international cooperation. We added important part on protection of whistleblowers. We had quite a good guidance here in the European Union directive on this topic, but we even went further because we are developing standards not only for the EU, but also for the whole world. We added something which the private sector was asking for many years, and this is what I call positive incentives for compliance, meaning that we do not only assist companies when they face potential criminal procedures because of foreign bribery, which happened, but also we are encouraging our countries to offer something to companies which will develop effective compliance systems even out of those proceedings. in the sense of additional economic benefits for the countries. And last but not least, the new topic, data protection, but not in the sense which most of you are used to listen to it, which is basically saying we have to protect data, whatever does it cost. We introduced a principle saying that data protection should not unduly inhibit or slow down our investigations and prosecutions. Of course, we are not the only ones doing things. So from 2009 until now, the OECD has adopted many other recommendations which are important for our work. We included them all in our, let's say, references, recommendation for developing cooperating actions on managing the risk of corruption, recommendation on guidelines on anti-corruption integrity in state-owned enterprises, recommendation on the OECD due diligence guidance for responsible business conduct, and recommendation on public integrity. So you have that all in the new recommendation. What you also have in the preamble is that we are, for the first time, we are mentioning the issue of gender and corruption, and for the first time we are mentioning the issue of new technologies. So I will leave it here. I'll give you the time to read and study the new recommendation. I'm sure it will take some time before you will all realize how much is in there. I have to say that from time to time I was a bit disappointed because reading the inputs, because I saw that the level of engagement, the level of, let's say, of thinking of our member states, sometimes it has been misunderstood in the sense that we really discussed all possible situations, all possible options, and tried to come up with the best one. So I'm sure there'll be plenty of words spent on the new recommendation, plenty of texts will be written, but I really hope that at the end of the day, the new text will help us all to enforce the convention even more rigorously as we did it before, and that it will help us all, the governments, the private sector, and civil society, to fight against foreign bribery. And of course, because countries usually do not introduce solutions only for foreign bribery, this will of course indirectly also help countries to help their national corruption cases. Enough from me. Today we have invited two guests from our external stakeholders, representative of private sector, representative of civil society, to see what is their input and what is their opinion on the new recommendation. We do not expect only praise, we also expect some criticism, but as I said, we had to let something for our successors. So the first one will be Mr. Nicola Loca. He's the chair of the BIEC Anti-Corruption Committee, who will present the business perspective on the new recommendation. Nicola, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, let me say how honored I am to be invited to speak here today in the occasion of the launch of the updated 2009-2021 recommendation. I would also like to express my congratulations to the Working Group of Bribery, with whom we have a very constructive cooperation for their hard work and their excellent job in making this update process as holistic and inclusive as possible, allowing us and other selected stakeholders to bring in our expertise. In these 10 minutes, I would like to focus on 4 main points. First, the role BIAC played during the review process. Business at OECD has been contributing to the update process from the very start. We believe that the update is very timely. The fight against corruption has developed significantly since 2009. Businesses have gained significant experience in implementing compliance programs, and the OECD has produced additional insights and studies on the demand side of bribery and the prevalence of corruption in SOEs. This research was complemented by the development of new instruments, including the guidelines on anti-corruption integrity in state-owned enterprises, as well as an implementation guide. Meanwhile, the new practice have emerged, including the growing use of non-trial resolution for resolving foreign bribery cases. We, BIAC, are the official representation of the business community at the OECD and one of the two institutional stakeholders of the organization. We act as a consultation partner to a wide range of OECD committees and feedback consolidated views and insights into the work of OECD, collaborating closely with the OECD Secretariat. Our BIAC Anti-Corruption Committee brings together compliance and anti-corruption experts from a range of different sectors in order to actively contribute the business voice to consultations with the OECD Working Group on Bribery, as well as other relevant discussions and fora dealing with the issues of bribery and corruption more broadly. The second topic that I would like to touch is how some core business priorities were taken on board and reflected in the review. Anti-bribery work matters to business. Anti-corruption efforts are in the best interest of business. A corruption-free environment supports business continuity and prevents reputational and monetary costs. The absence of corruption in a given market, country, system, more broadly, is essential to safeguard fair competition and a level playing field. We see an important role of the OECD to act as a leading institution in the international fight against corruption. The OECD, as a multidisciplinary organization, is perfectly suited to assess and address bribery in different forms of economic activities. For example, export credits, development cooperation, state-owned enterprises. The fight against corruption is an important element of the broader responsible business conduct agenda, which the OECD is spearheading. The OECD acts as a convener by bringing together policymakers and therefore can contribute to consolidate multilateral approaches to end corruption internationally. We appreciate that the organization is taking such an active role in the fight against corruption, hosting multiple important instruments, most notably the Anti-Bribery Convention and the 2009 recommendation with its Annex 2, the Good Practice Guidance, which has been a valuable source of guidance for businesses. The third topic that I want to touch is some remarks on the role the 2009 recommendation plays for business. We are pleased to see so many business priorities reflected in the final text. We have consistently underlined that in order to ensure an holistic approach to the fight against corruption, bribery must be addressed at every level and both on the supply and the demand sides. To that end, we very much appreciate the inclusion of a dedicated section on the demand side, emphasizing the importance of awareness raising and training for preventing and detecting foreign bribery. We also very much appreciate in this context the call to promote the engagement in anti-bribery collective action initiatives with the private sectors, which can be a very effective tool to address bribe solicitation. Whistleblowers are another essential element in the fight against corruption. In this regard, we strongly support the additional recommendations with respect to the protection of whistleblowers and the provision of well-published and easy accessible reporting channels, including the update 2009 recommendation. To support compliance, corporate compliance efforts, we also need a general level playing field and governments walking the talk. We thus strongly appreciate the explicit references to the guideline on anti-corruption and integrity in state-owned enterprises, the recognition made in recommendations in Annex 2 in this regard, as well as the call to establish internal controls, ethics, and compliance programs apply to state-owned enterprises in the same way as they apply to private companies. Moreover, we very much welcome the inclusion of additional provision that create positive incentives for companies to invest in their compliance programs in order to increase their compliance capacity. For instance, by encouraging law enforcement authorities to consider such programs as potential mitigating factors, and government agencies to take such programs into account in granting of public advantages. In this case, it is important to consider differences across sectors and company sizes in order to ensure SMEs buy-in, and that appropriate relevant information about the process is publicly available. We have always advocated for the possibility to mitigate debarment decisions, believing that this can support companies' efforts to come clean and invest in corporate compliance programs. To that end, we appreciate respective provisions in the revised text. Finally, I would like to give some remarks on how this will change with the 2021 recommendation. Yet there remain opportunities to further promote the fight against corruption, and we stand ready to work with the OECD on these issues. The text initiatives, the working group on bribery, to consult regularly with the business community. We stand ready to share our experiences, concerns, as well as potential solutions. And we also look forward to work together with the OECD to address new emerging issues in the field of anti-bribery, as well as anti-corruption more broadly. The preamble mentioned, for instance, the potential role of innovative technologies in advancing public and private sector efforts to combat foreign bribery. And yet, while the text already refers to innovative technologies in the context of internal control system and multilateral legal assistance, the discussion of the role of smart solutions is evolving further, revealing a growing number of opportunities to strengthen monitoring system and to reduce interaction in public processes. At the same time, we must be aware that there may also be risks associated with these technologies. That said, business is ready to explore, together with OECD, how new technologies can be leveraged in the best way possible for the fight against corruption. In conclusion, I would like to reiterate the commitment and readiness of the BIAC Anti-Corruption Committee to actively collaborate with OECD, walking the talk next to legality. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Loca. So it was nice to listen to all the good words, and of course we'll continue our cooperation or even strengthen it in the future too. Next is Ms. Gillian Dell. She's the head of Conventions Unit at Transparency International, and she will present the civil society perspective on the text of the recommendation. Gillian, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Chair. Members of the Working Group on Bribery. Thanks for the opportunity to speak on behalf of Transparency International and civil society more generally at this important occasion on Anti-Corruption Day. It's an honor. Many congratulations to you, Chair, and to the whole working group on finalizing the OECD 2020 Anti-Bribery Recommendation and on this launch today. We commend you for your hard work to update this crucial complementary document to the OECD Anti-Bribery Convention and the important advances you've made. You've expanded and improved on the text in significant ways, and we greatly hope that this will help improve foreign bribery enforcement and thus deterrence of foreign bribery, which is the ultimate goal and has not yet been reached. As you know, our last exporting corruption report in 2020 showed a significant decline in active enforcement from 7 to 4 countries. And even some of the active enforcers narrowly escaped moving down. Although the news wasn't all bad, since 2 major exporting countries moved up to moderate levels of enforcement. But overall, the results are not what the convention foresees. More enforcement will not only serve to help level the playing field in international business, it will also help to put a stop to the harm caused by foreign bribery to populations in affected countries. This includes major harm to democracy and human rights around the world. And in fact, this was the subject of a panel we organized this past Tuesday ahead of the Summit for Democracy that the US is currently hosting. Let me turn to a few specific points. First, I'd like to say and thank the OECD for conducting a commendably consultative process in revising the recommendation ever since it started work. This has included opportunities for stakeholder inputs in both written and oral forms. And we've done our best to provide useful contributions after seeking the views of our chapters in OECD convention countries, as well as in countries more on the demand side of foreign bribery. In the resulting revised document, we welcome in particular the new sections on non-trial resolutions, protection of reporting persons or whistleblowers, international cooperation, and the demand side of foreign bribery, among others. The new guidance on non-trial resolutions is very much needed given the increased use of this tool in OECD convention countries in very disparate ways. We hope, however, that non-trial resolutions will not be treated as a substitute for prosecutions. In the new text on non-trial resolutions, we very much welcome the references to transparency, and the same holds true for the transparency language in the sections on resolved cases and sanctions. Public trust in these processes depends on transparency. Justice must be seen to be done. We hope that parties go beyond the minimum and also publish relevant documents. We raised some other issues about the text on non-trial resolutions, which I won't go into here, but nevertheless, this section is a very useful addition. We also commend the addition of the section on protection of whistleblowers, protecting the importance of this channel for detection. We're very glad to see the emphasis on this subject, and we will continue to encourage countries to adopt the ISO standard language in this area. International cooperation has also been a long-standing problem area despite some advances. So we also welcome the extensive new text on that subject, including the second section on handling multi-jurisdictional cases. We hope this will provide an underpinning for improvements. The new text on confiscation of proceeds of foreign bribery is also an important advance, one that had been emphasized by the G20. However, at the risk of being the skunk at the picnic, as my dear old collaborator Fritz Hyman would put it, I will also mention one major disappointment. That disappointment is the lack of recommendations on victims' rights and victims' compensation. This could have been as simple as saying that victims' rights should be recognized in foreign bribery proceedings. The preambular text of the updated recommendation acknowledges the harmful effects caused by foreign bribery and the importance of effectively combating it in order to address and prevent those effects on society. The follow-through is missing in the main text. We heard from some parties that in the negotiations on the text, they supported including language on victims' rights, but there was strong opposition from some influential countries. The omission of text on this subject is a tremendous missed opportunity and gives the impression that the gravity of the harm is not appreciated by members of the OECD Working Group on Bribery, or at least some of them. Giving concrete recognition to the harm is a matter of justice. It would also serve as an important deterrent. Without wanting to revisit your tough negotiations on this subject or repeat our many submissions covering this subject, let me make a few quick points in that regard. First, complexity in this area should not override the interests of justice. Second, at a minimum, it would be fair to presume that the harm caused is at least as much as the proceeds of corruption that should be confiscated. There are also long-standing models of community restitution, just to name one example. Third, the people who are harmed should not be neglected because their leaders have betrayed their trust. And fourth, finding avenues to pay compensation may be complicated, but this challenge can be overcome. We urge countries that support recognition of victims' rights to continue discussions on the subject, leading to the development of a statement by the OECD Working Group on Bribery and/or guidelines on the subject. And we stand ready to support such an initiative in any way we can. For our part, we will continue to do our best to raise awareness about the subject, as we did this past Tuesday. In conclusion, we congratulate you on the progress achieved with the new Anti-Bribery Recommendation and look forward to the robust monitoring of these provisions going forward in the future. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you today.
Thank you, Gillian, not only for your words today, including the criticism, but also for your, let's say, participation and assistance, not only of TI, but also because I know that you personally and some of your friends have been, let's say, very engaged in delivering the messages to us. So this is what we needed. We will try to seek how to deal with the outstanding issue, the one which you mentioned, maybe in some other form. But as I said, we had to left some topics for the future. Otherwise, our successor will not have anything else to do, except rigorous monitoring, which you mentioned. And since I can ensure you, let's say, since the TI called this working group as the gold standard of monitoring, we are doing our best to deserve and to keep this title for the future too. So I said at the beginning, we are ending the 5 years of work, but basically today we're starting the real work. For our member states, it means implementing and enforcing the text of 2021 recommendation. For us in the working group as such, it means monitoring how our countries are enforcing the convention. And you can stay assured that we will do everything in our power that also the new recommendation will be implemented, not only to the extent which the convention and the 2009 recommendation are implemented, but also a bit stronger if possible, of course. So let me thank you all for participating today. Special thanks goes once again to the Secretary General, who really made, let's say, important contribution to and recognition of our work. And as I said, the real work starts now. Thank you and hope to see you soon. In person, of course, not only online. Those of you who are online, you will have to disconnect from this one and to connect to the next one.